Okay, so I have a fragment of a theme that I think I've got something to speak about. Don't know how it's going to go, don't know really where it's going to lead. I'm just open to whatever comes forth. And so when I look at what I do, I don't lay claim to being the creator of what I'm saying. Somebody mentioned in a comment the other day saying our words aren't our own, and of course this is perfectly true, because the words that we're using are borrowed from language, and invariably we are borrowing many scenarios from other people's experience. And those of us that are looking at YouTube videos and listening to debates and all this sort of thing, we will be embodying varying opinions, and somehow some of us will create our own particular way of delivering these opinions. It's very much like when people are at college or university. They have a certain subject and they're given a certain task, and the task involves reading other people's words and putting it into your own words. And the purpose of this task is, first and foremost, to endow yourself with that knowledge, and then to express that you understand this knowledge by being able to put it into your own words rather than just copying it down verbatim. And so none of our words are our own, of course. We're borrowing it all. And when we look at the actions that we do, are our actions our own, or were they given to us genetically, ideologically, socially? These varieties of pervasive entities, I mean, if you look at something like an ideology or a zeitgeist or something, it's an entity unto itself, because it has a motion, it has an energy, it has a driving force, and it grows, it waxes and it wanes. Ideologies wax and wane, don't they? They start off with very little energy, then they gain an enormous momentum, and then invariably they fizzle out. And so when you look at this, when you look at what's happening, then this is what's happening in the whole of the universe. And one of the reasons why I feel that people are so discontent is because they are expecting the universe to be in a certain way. When you look at the universe, albeit it apparently involves a lineage so incomprehensible to that of the human being, we don't really derive any reality from it. For instance, when people say that the universe is 13.5 billion years old and ultimately it's going to expand into oblivion, and it's going to become so fragmented, and all the planets and stars are going to be so far away from one another that basically it's just going to end up in a frozen mass when all the stars die out and all the planets are so far away from these stars that they can't generate any heat or absorb any heat, or all this sort of thing. And then when we look closer to home, when we look at this world, we see that there's a circle of life. There is a beginning and there's an end, and there is a youthfulness, and then it matures into some sort of area which we could consider the mean, like middle age. And during this period, everything seems to be at its best. We've grown and we've matured and we've blossomed and we've bloomed, and that's the period whereby we should really capitalise on this life in the best possible way whilst we can. When we are of an age whereby we know a little bit of something about this world, so we can avoid the pitfalls, and we have a reasonable amount of knowledge about the things that are available to us, you see, because if we don't know that things are available to us, then we'll probably never experience them. And then, of course, just like a rose or a flower, when it starts to wither, then this is the old age, and then ultimately we will die. And so life is about death, basically. We are born, we're given life, but then at the back of our minds somewhere lies death. And so ever increasingly we have a greater awareness of this death, and we are approaching the death at every given second. It doesn't matter how old we are, we're getting closer and closer to death. And so we are immersed in a unconscious fear for the better part, and this unconscious fear, it becomes more and more conscious the older we get, and the more of a realisation we get to the closeness of it. And so then there becomes a certain urgency in our middle years, whereby we want to make something of ourselves, and we want to create some sort of an individual utopia. And so we look around at the world and we try to assess how best to do this. And this is where the problem lies these days, because there's too many choices. There's an enormous amount of choice which is bamboozling, and many people they can't make those levels of choice because it just becomes too much. And particularly in view of the fact that most of the choices don't seem really to be available to us, because it would take us away from the people that we've known all of our lives. Okay, so there's choices all around the world. Look at all the places you can go and live. Well, I mean, you can't take your family with you invariably, unless you are a parent and you can take your young children with you. But they have to be very young, because if they're sort of the age of about 10 or something, then they've already created probably which will be the best friends in their lives. Because when we meet people, the chances are that we're going to meet the friends that we're going to stay friends with for all of our lives whilst we're in these formative years. And so if you take children away from their social environment when they're about, say, like 10 or 15, then you have deprived them of their long-term friends, because that period of growth whereby you bond with one another is mostly over by the time you get past your 20s. For some reason, which I'm not clear about, it just seems a whole lot more difficult to make friends of a very lasting variety when you get over a certain age. And so your children may not want to go, and even if they do go, then there's some sort of consideration that you might have to take. And so if we look at why the world is like it is, and there's a great level of discontentment, it's due to the insecurity of not knowing what we are. And this is why we've got this battle at this moment in time in relation to religion and ideologies, because we want to consider that we know where we derive from, because this gives us our cornerstone. If we don't know where we derive from, if we just made manifest and we are not prepared to believe that we derived out of apes, then what's the other alternative? Well, I mean, one of them is, okay, so we were spliced genetically via some sort of alien creature. Okay, not too many people want to accept that. The other one is, which most people have a great acceptance with, is that we were created out of the dust of the earth, and you know, Eve was created out of the rib of Adam, and this sort of nonsense. And so you look at it and you think, oh please, you know, we're intelligent beings. Couldn't anybody come up with a better, you know, more believable story than that? It just seems wholly preposterous. And so we get confused about it, don't we? And so it's kind of like, well, we've got no idea really where we come from, and we most certainly don't have any idea where we're going unless you believe in Muhammad or Jehovah, and then you've got this ridiculous fantasy about living in this variety of utopia forever and ever. And so, increasingly, more and more people are starting to fall away from embracing those ridiculous ideas, and we're looking for something more substantial, but we can't find it, because all we find is, when we look around us, we find entropy. This is the nature of the universe. This is the nature of nature. And so when we look at nature, everything around us has a beginning and an end, and most things around us have a lifespan which is far less than ours. So we see things come and go. We see roses come and go every season. We see daffodils come and go every season, and we don't think anything of it. We just accept that that's the way it is. But we have little acceptance of accepting that's the way it is for us. We just don't want to accept that we just come and go like any other natural thing on this planet. We want to find reason, and we want to extend our demise into something that's never ending. It's everlasting, that this is only a temporary experience, and we're privileged, and we then will go on to another realm whereby we will retain our consciousness forever and ever, and we will have many, many marvellous experiences. We don't want to consider that we're just like a bat or a fox or any other of the beautiful creatures of this planet. Why is that? I think it's because we have a variety of mutation. We have a mutation in that we have been given an intelligence which enables us to question the nature of the universe, but it doesn't give us the ability to answer, because when we look for the answers, they seem unanswerable. And that's a very, very curious thing. Hang on, God, you created us in your image to know all things, but you know, outside of the Bible, outside of the Garden of Eden, then we can't really discern anything, because it all appears to be indiscernible. There's nothing really that is everlasting. Everything is in a constant state of flux. It's changing all the time, and so therefore there can be no answers per se. There can be no truth. It's just a constant transition. And so I'm trying to piece together, people, what it is that the world is so discontent about. Why does humanity have such a level of discontentment? Why does it expect that the world should offer it bliss? I mean, look around you. The universe offers nothing else constant bliss. If you look at flowers, for instance, then in spring the flowers start to bloom, and they will be in their state of blooming at their height and beauty for a small period of time, and then they wither away and make room for new ones to come. And so if we cast our eyes around the universe, we see it's all changing, but we don't want to accept that it applies to us. We want to make other considerations, and I think that's where the greatest issue lies, because we can't accept that we just live and die. And, you know, many of us have had experiences whereby we have been to places, seemingly, that seem to go on forever, and don't seem to have time as a restriction. They just seem to be. And so those of us that have had those experiences, then it's a wonderful thing, because it gives you what people are looking for in religious books. This story of everlasting, the eternal bliss and all this sort of thing. When your mindset has been tuned into or slipped into this variety of feeling, you've felt it, and you think, wow, I mean, that's incredible, that just seems over and above anything that I could experience on this planet. This planet is beautiful in many, many respects, but the enormous blissful, euphoric feeling that you get when you have a religious experience, or maybe a near-death experience, or psychological experience. And then, of course, this lends to the notion that there is something after. And many biblical and religious scholars have made this conclusion that it's due to psychedelics that these notions of eternity have been born out of. Because on substances like dimethyltryptamine, you're in a realm which seems to have been around forever and ever and ever, and it is so familiar to you, it's 1,000 times more familiar than this world. And so when you've had notions or feelings like that, then it's very reasonable for you to assume that there is an afterlife. But for people that haven't had those feelings, then even though they proclaim to believe in a certain religion, they've never known this feeling. They've never had this experience, and so they're not sure whether really it is true. And it's just a belief that they go to heaven and they become martyrs and all this sort of thing. And so at the back of their minds then is still an unsurety. And as long as they feel insecure about where they're going, then they feel that there's a certain urgency about what they're doing in this life, and so that they look for greater reason. They want purpose. They want to know, give me purpose. What is my purpose? Well, if you just accept, because you have experienced this timelessness, then you become so relaxed because there's no urgency anymore. Why would there be, if really there isn't any time? And so this is why I'm an advocate of any substance which can give people this experience. Because once you've had experiences like this, then all this nonsense pales into insignificance. And the likes of politics and ideological differences and all this sort of thing just become so ridiculous that they don't even bear thinking about. It's just nonsense, and so you detach yourself from it. And when you detach yourself from what is considered to be a so-called reality, then you may be considered to be very aloof. Why don't you care about what's happening in this world, about the political changes and about the ideological changes and the religious changes that are coming about? Well, I mean, because the reality is there's no changes. There's just an illusion of change, an illusion of time. And so then you become somewhat of a nihilist. Because if you've experienced this certain something which is infinite, and you know you are it, and you are in a realm which just seems so preposterous, it really does seem ridiculous. It's ridiculous beyond measure. It's absurd. That's how ridiculous it is. It's completely crazy, due to the conflict going on and the diversity. And nobody can make head or tail of it. Doesn't matter how clever they are. It's only their subjective opinion. And equally clever people will have a great diverse set of stories which they project onto the world. How it is, and all you have to do is just look at all the philosophers that have come before us, and all their projections of ideology and the stories that they lay claim to as to what we are and where we come from and all this sort of thing. And so, at this moment in time, people are becoming really, really confused due to the massive influx of information. And so, I would think that there is great value in being ignorant. I mean, ignorant has always been considered by lots of people to be where bliss lays, where bliss resides, because the less you know, the less complicated this life is. And in the old days, when there wasn't anything like the availability of information, then life was simple. You had a simple education, and then you left your education and you went into a relatively simple arena to work, and you held this position for many years, and invariably lots of people never had more than a handful of jobs, and some people in actual fact would go into one job all their life. If they were a tradesperson like a carpenter or a bricklayer or something, that's what they'd do for the rest of their lives. And so you can see how much more simple it was. And there weren't these massive existential questions looming over them all the time. But even if you're not a philosopher these days, then these questions are there, and there's an awareness of them. You know, what are we? Where are we going? Where did we come from? People are giving this more and more thought, due to the insecurity that is so pervasive these days. Because in the old days, there was no reason to question these things. You just think, well, maybe there is a God and I'll go to heaven. But there was a level of contentment in your life because you had a greater comfort. You know, you bought your home, and the chances are you stayed in one home or maybe 2 or 3 homes in your life, and you had 2 or 3 jobs, and you raised a family, and that was it. Now what's going on with all of the scientific innovations with AI and quantum computers and different stories hitting the headlines about the nature of the universe and all the various ideas about it, like it's a simulation, it's a hologram, and you know, all these sort of variances, and people are getting very confused about this, and being confused brings about insecurity. Insecurity brings about anxiety. Anxiety brings about fear, fear brings about anger, anger brings about revolt, and so you can see then that we're heading for some sort of existential crisis, because the goalposts keep moving all the time, whether there is in actual fact any goalpost these days. I mean, how many of you would consider that there's a goalpost? How confident would you be that in, say, like 30, 40, 50 years' time, you can predict your future? Man, you couldn't do that with 2 or 3 or 5 years, because societies are changing massively. That all of these visions of one's future are being shattered on a constant basis. I mean, in recent times, when we look at how we used to invest a portion of our wage into our pension, well, what happened, you know, only a few years ago? All the pension funds, they just evaporated overnight, and nobody knew where the money went. And so people have been investing, you know, all their working lives, 30, 40, 50 years. And then you look to the government for where the money is. You don't know where the money's gone. 1 minute there was numbers on the computer, and the next minute they were gone. Sorry. And so there's no confidence anymore, is there? And increasingly the confidence is waning due to the conflict that we've got going with our political system, because it just seems like a huge squabbling match, and we've come to notice that there's no difference in the agenda of the politicians from one side to the other, and so even the political sides have morphed into some sort of nonsensical parody of delusionment. It's just so far-flung, it's so far-fetched, it's become a parody of itself. You know, people expressing how they want to drive the country into, you know, a new glorious future. And the moment they get in, it just seems ridiculous. You look at it and you go, oh my God, what really is happening? Can anybody say what's happening from one day to the next? Can anybody believe anything? We can't, can we? And so, ignorance is one thing we may want to consider, because I'm telling you people, the more you learn, the more bizarre it gets, and the more of a nihilist you're going to become. And so if you stay within the comfort zone of your religion or your ideological beliefs, then that may be the best position for you to be in. Because if you have an adherence to a belief system, then you're just going to keep believing it no matter what, because that's what brings structure and value to your life. And you can watch all the changes going on around you, and you can just be in denial of them. I.e., if you believe in God or something like this, then you will have a faith of where you're going in the end. And I don't think that's a bad idea, really, because those that don't have a faith or don't have any scientific assessment in a realm of, say, like parallel universes or holographic universe or simulation or this sort of thing, if they can't lend themselves to thinking that they are going to carry on, then all they've got is this. And this is increasingly becoming very frustrating and dissatisfying. And so then you can see that the world is pretty well in a state of entropy. I mean, that's what it is. That's what it seems to be designed to be. It's entropic. It just keeps turning itself inside out. It seems like that itself, consciousness itself, the universe itself doesn't even know. It doesn't even know where the end is. It seems like it's got no more idea about it than us. And at the end of the day, if the universe is conscious and we share consciousness, then we know as much as it does, really. In that we don't know. We as a species, as a collective consciousness, are being propelled on a certain trajectory. And I don't know as anybody's really looked at the world and looked at this trajectory, because what it seems like to me, it seems like if you look at, say, like 5 ferrets in a sack and you try to discern how many ferrets there are actually in that sack, you wouldn't be able to tell, would you, really? I mean, is it 2 or is it 5? Is it 3 or is it 5? I mean, if these figures make you know, enormous amount of difference, whether you're wrong or right, then, you know, that could be a problem. And so if you're looking at a sack full of ferrets and they're pushing out all over the place, that's what this energy of the human being seems to be like. It's gaining the momentum, it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter, the pressure's building up, and there appears to be like a thin membrane around it, and consciousness is starting to protrude through this membrane to the point where it's going to burst out like a coronal mass ejection. It seems to be like that. So I don't know. Honestly, I don't know, people. I don't know about anything. All I'm doing is looking at the madness and choosing from time to time when I want to get involved in the madness. Now, I'm involving myself in the complete tranquility. And all that stuff that's going on, apparently around the world, I've got no idea whether it really is going on. I just turn on the computer and the computer tells me it's going on. It could be just a part of my dream. I've never been to Afghanistan, I've never been to North Korea, I've never been to Syria. I've got no idea what's going on in these places, really. Nor has anybody else, because we know that the media are barefaced, blatant liars. And so it could all just be a propagandistic illusion, and we just could be brains in a jar, that sort of thing. There's so much about this world that we could never ever prove, isn't there? And so why do we want to bring that into our reality? Why do we want things that we've got no chance of ever proving? Why do we want to bring those into our reality and create the negative emotions which pertain to them? I mean, because at the end of the day, what we do to ourselves is when we take in information, we then create an appropriate emotion pertaining to that information. And so if the information that we are being privy to is all about the failing human species and the onset of the financial crash and the lack of resources and all this sort of stuff going on, when we look at all that, then we embody certain emotions to it, don't we? And so we create the emotions within us. And so if you don't watch it, then you don't create the emotions. And so then you can become very, very stable. And it seems to me that that is the best way to be, being ignorant of all this stuff. Unless, of course, you can absorb this information without it touching you emotionally, whereby you can just stay like Captain Spock, no emotion. You're just receiving the data. But what's the point of that? What's the point of receiving the data if you don't create any emotion with it? I mean, because life is about the emotional experience, isn't it? We endeavour as much as we can to have a pleasant experience. We want to experience love and joy and excitement and all this sort of thing. But of course we know that love and joy and excitement and all of these blissful emotions is kind of like you're swimming through a soup of black and white balls, and the white balls pertain to the enjoying aspects of life, and the black ones pertain to the negative aspects. And it's just par for the course that you're going to be bumping into an equal amount of black ones as you are white ones. I mean, this is just the whole aspect of probability, isn't it? And so life is like that, but people don't want to accept that. When people experience something negative, they create then an additional negativity about it. For instance, if somebody breaks their leg and they go, "Oh, I've broken my leg, oh, I can't do this, oh, my leg's broken, oh God, if only my leg wasn't broken," then what are they doing? They're creating double pain, aren't they? They've already got pain in the leg, and now they've created pain in their mind and maybe in the heart. If you just accept that your leg's broken and you go, okay, my leg's broken, now there's certain avenues of things that I can no longer pursue. Let's not get rink about that. Let's have a look at the avenues which I can pursue. And then you see, when you do that, then the fact that you've broke your leg doesn't really become an issue. It's just, all it means is that you temporarily are switching into a different variety of person, and you're pursuing different interests and things like that. And it's kind of like when I was incarcerated and people say, you know, how was that? And I said, well, you know, it was great. What do you mean it was great? How could it be great? You're incarcerated, damn it, you know, this, that and the other. Well, you see, if you look at it like that, I'm incarcerated and I can't do this and I can't do that and I can't see these people and that people and I can't drink beer and I can't do any number of things. If you lend yourself to thinking about all the negative, then you're just going to have a negative experience, because all you're going to be doing every single day is kicking yourself in the face. But if you just accept your predicament and you say to yourself, well, okay, I can't do all that stuff, what can I do? And then you'll see that there's an enormous amount of things that you can do. And one of the things about being incarcerated is that you are in constant proximity to the same people for a long time, and so you have the opportunity to get to know people on a very, very personal level. And for those of us that are interested in, you know, any of the humanities, then that should be interesting. It was for me. And then I could pursue an enormous amount of reading and education, and I could train, you know, every single day, because the gym, you know, I lived in the freaking gym basically. And so if we turn our minds to the positive aspects of life and we just accept the negative but we don't give them energy, then you can see that life will be a much more smoother place to be. And so this is how I look at it. I look at the world with all the changes, and I'm thinking, well, I'm not bothered about any changes. I accept that there's going to be changes, because just like anything else, the human race cannot go along on the same trajectory, because the universe doesn't follow one trajectory. And so therefore we have to be wise enough to be able to look at the world changing and have a great level of acceptance for it, and be prepared to change ourselves. And so if you can change yourself, when one door closes another one opens, if you have that attitude, then of course it would never matter to you. But if you're insecure and you're clinging on to the way things are, you know, so die-hardly, then you're going to resent any change that comes about, because, oh, this is different now, that's different now. Embrace change, people, and embrace this new world that we're going forward into. Some of it will be bad, but some of it will be good. It can't all be bad. And so to help us on our way of embracing the things that are good, then we have to be probably quite creative and open-minded, and look at ourselves and reassess ourselves and reevaluate ourselves. You know, what new skills can I learn, or how can I morph into, you know, something else? You know, because if you're an old dog and you can't learn new tricks, then this new world isn't going to be a comfortable place for you to dwell within. But if you can still learn new tricks, and you have an open mind, and you are looking forward to seeking out the pleasure from whatever environment makes manifest, then you have a better chance of living your life instead of just existing through it. And so I don't know what I've said in this video. I've just meandered around, and I'm just sort of feeling my way through. You see, when I look at people, intellectuals speaking, that's all they're doing. They're just feeling their way through. And recently one of the viewers sent a couple of Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris dialogues, arguments, debates, whatever. And these two people are very, very intellectual. And the level at which they look at this world is so deep and profound. There's only a very, very small fraction of people that look at the world the way they do. You know, some sort of philosopher. And so they are addressing very, very deep and profound issues, which basically 99 point something of the world's population don't even know exist. They've got no idea how things move them subliminally, and how certain epochs and zeitgeists come and go, and you know, build up certain momentums, and there's all these energies and forces, and they're all swirling around. It's kind of like a lantern, well, like a genie's lantern, only in it you've got about 100 varying genies, and you know, when the lantern is open, then they're all going to burst out, and they're all fighting for your attention. They all want your attention. And so you look around and you go, oh my God, you know, hang on, I thought there was only one genie. No, it turns out there's 100 genies. And so all these 100 genies want your undivided attention, and they've got offers for you. And it's kind of like, oh my God, I don't know how I can choose. You say this and you say that and you say something else. How can I believe any of you, and this and the other? And so that's what's happened. I think 100 genies have been released out of the lantern of life. And it's thrown a real spanner in the works, and now none of us know what on earth is going on. And so so this video don't get too long, I'll end this one here, and maybe I'll be speaking about it from another facet a bit later.